Eddie Pillow, what are the books, shows, or movies that defined you? Okay, well, I think I'm not really so different from probably most everybody else, that I think the things that I saw when I was a kid probably defined me more than anything else, in terms of my worldviews and ideas and about things and how things should be. And I feel fortunate in that I grew up in the 1970s when Spielberg and Lucas became gigantic filmmakers, and through the 80s. And so I was witness to and fully involved in the Star Wars movies and also Spielberg's movies. I was huge on those. I would see these movies, I'd get very, very interested in them and the subject matter, and I'd go to the library because I was a voracious reader, and I would just read and study everything about these subjects that I was so fascinated by because of the movies. Close Encounters of the Third Kind turned me on to UFOs like nothing else. Jaws, I learned all about sharks. I mean, I just went hog wild with this stuff. Raiders of the Lost Ark, oh my God, that combined everything into the most perfect movie ever as far as I was concerned. So I was really into the values that those movies preached, which were family values, and were, I think they provided a fairly good moral compass. And of course I read a lot. I read tons of books. I was very much into fantasy and science fiction. Read Tolkien, oh gosh, there's just such an array of authors that I was exposed to when I was a kid. Historical fiction, science fiction, fantasy, Terry Goodkind, Isaac Asimov, Ray Bradbury. I mean, all those stories. Some of them were obviously, older stories. The Twilight Zone, which were morality tales, really. I love the old Twilight Zones and the new ones. I think there's been 3 iterations of the Twilight Zone, and I loved all of them. So those were the kind of things that sort of shaped my my worldview. And probably one of the biggest influences on me when I was a kid was Stephen King. Because in addition to all the fantasy and sci-fi and wild stuff, Stephen King kind of taught me or showed me a way of writing that I loved his style. I loved the content of his stories, but mostly I loved the style of his writing. And I just picked up on it right away. And I started writing mirroring his style. Because when you first start out, you don't have a style. You got to work at it, and you got to write and write and write before you'll come up with your own. It's kind of how it works. So I emulated him, and I read his books on writing, Dance Macabre, and another short book that he wrote called On Writing. And I really, that was what shaped me to want to be a writer and a teacher, because I was going to go into writing through teaching, just like he did. So I'd say that was a pretty big influence on me. And the only thing that became a bigger influence was Scientology. And I've tried to keep the good and winnow out the bad at this point. And I think I've done an okay job at that. I mean, I learned morality through Scientology. I learned about good and evil as a kid. The idea of committing harmful acts, or what are called overts in Scientology, is a no-no, that they would have spiritual consequences. That they would sort of sit on your conscience and prey on you. I think that's a valuable lesson, actually, for a kid to learn, is that your actions have consequences. That when you take things or hurt things, that you're affecting more than just you. And I learned those things, and I learned them through Hubbard's policies and his influences. I talked about a book called Miracles for Breakfast, which was written by Ruth Minshall, who was a Scientologist, and she basically took Hubbard's work and kind of secularized it and turned it into these couple books that she wrote that more simply communicated Hubbard's concepts, but it was 100% Hubbard. And so I had a pretty strong moral compass when I was a kid, in terms of defining right and wrong, and also feeling a sort of a strength in goodness, and in maintaining a clean conscience. That was really important to me growing up, and I've since coming out of Scientology and looking at the world at large and stuff, it would be, it's a good lesson for people to have. So I think that that shaped me, and of course Scientology did. More recently, of course, critical thinking and I'd say Carl Sagan's book called A Demon Haunted World, Science as a Light or a Candle in the Darkness, was a very, very influential book for me. So that's what I can say about that. I hope that answers your question.